Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Inspire Health podcast here on UK Health Radio. And I am your host, Dr. Jason Loken. I'm a naturopathic doctor and an osteopath. And today we are continuing on with part 2 of our interview with Dr. Linda Backman. And if you enjoyed part 1, I think you're going to be fascinated by part 2 as we dive even deeper and go into more questions, tying with her experience in past life regression therapy and as a psychologist for over 30 years. This rounds out more of our conversation of life, death, and beyond, exploring our greater reality, which is the current series that we are finishing up with. So the first part, we learned lots about the different types of souls that come here, differences between earth-based souls, interplanetary-based souls, and angelic souls. We learned around the concepts of soul clusters and soul groups. And today we are going to take this even further as we go into more questions around past life regression versus between life soul regression. What's the difference between those things? How do we make sense out of the different struggles and challenges that we tend to go through over and over again? And what is the underlying meaning for even being here? What's the purpose of being here? And how do we best support our kids? If we look at our kids a lot of times being actually old souls that are coming and incarnating on earth at this time, how do we best support them and learn from them and set the stage for them to be able to step into what they came here for? So again, fascinating episode. I find this whole concept very, very, very interesting. And if you are just catching this show now, go back to the inspirehealthpodcast.com and you can watch all of the different episodes within this series. This has been a mind-blowing experience going through all the different guests that we've talked to, lots of near-death experiencers, psychics, visionaries, theologians, lots of different people to help round this concept of life, death, and rebirth and our greater reality. And I think if you're like me, I am just fascinated by all of it. I want to understand how things work. I want to have more practical experiences with it myself. I want to know how to connect more wholeheartedly to my complete multidimensional self, the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, metaphysical. And these conversations that we get to have, I always find really beneficial, and they land for me somewhere new with every single conversation. They make me change my perspective slightly or expand it into something more than I previously knew. I think this is super helpful for us in moving forward in our lives. Just the more that we can see what expansion can we have and what more can we learn so that we can just keep seeing life through new lenses. I think that's incredibly important. So if you find this interesting, please share, like, subscribe. Our new series that's going to be coming up fairly soon is going to be all on creating New Earth, a collaborative mission. And we are going to talk to a bunch of different people in all sorts of fields of health and wellness, spirituality, water, and how to, all this sort of fascinating stuff around water and water holding memory and how to get clean water, how to create live water versus this dead water that we often are consuming. We're going to talk to educators and teachers and really paint a picture of what could things be like. What do we want to focus our energy and direction on that we want to create in this world, as opposed to getting so caught up all the time in what's really fearful. We can use that as a catalyst for what we're wanting to create. And that's what this series is going to be about. So even homesteaders, I want to talk to different homesteaders that are doing really phenomenal things on their own at home and really stepping into that place of sovereignty. And if that sounds interesting as well, then just go to the inspirehealthpodcast.com and sign up for the newsletter, and you will hear of all of the new information as it is coming out and when the new series will be released. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate your support, and please like, share, and subscribe. That helps us get this information out best than anything else. And it bypasses any algorithms that are actually trying to prevent some of this information to even getting out. So thank you very much for all of your support and for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Fortunately, I always wanted to be a parent in this lifetime, so that's good. But I knew part of the balance that I was to accomplish in my life today was to be a mother, was to be a grandmother, which I am, and to have that be a very important part of my life. So people need to think about what do they love and what really resonates, and we might say turns them on, lights them up. What is that? And follow that.
That'll be a good journal practice for a lot of listeners, I think. Linda, can you describe karma? Can you define karma?
Yeah. Again, excellent question. Karma is real. Karma, as I said a moment ago, it's one of the unique qualities of coming into the human body. No matter what our plan was before we came, and we always have a plan before we come, we have free will. And so we make, missteps. We make not the best choices. Our guides understand that. We're harder on ourselves usually than our guides are. Now, not if we're someone who regularly used people, and they're certainly on occasion our souls. Think about a despot. Think about the leader of a country who is the leader is very much a narcissistic soul and is really misusing people. That does happen. And that isn't something our guides just shine on. But, oh my God, here's a common thing. I think about themes that just pop into my mind. I will often have clients who go to past lives where they were a community leader. And I don't necessarily mean they were the head of a country or the king or queen of a castle, but they were the leader. It could have been hundreds of years ago. They were the leader of a group, and a trauma occurred, like their village was, there was a village massacre. That soul, that leader may carry guilt from not being able to protect their villagers. And often when that soul leaves that lifetime, they carry an imprint of guilt or lack of accomplishment. That might be the past life that surfaces in the regression. I don't choose the past life. The client's guides and the client's soul, their higher self, chooses the past life. It's fairly common for the client to come upon those lives where they couldn't protect their community, and the client needs to let herself off the hook. And that's what the guides often are saying to the client.
Linda, do you think it's possible to have, when continual incarnations, I would imagine the idea would be that we accumulate a certain amount of wisdom as we keep going along, with the idea that we ultimately become more loving, more benevolent as we move along with more and more impact, just because we learn that, we start to see that. Is it possible that, it makes me think of the book Neil Donald Walsh did on The Little Soul in the Sun, around the idea of having this conversation before
Our
coming
kids'
down.
book.
Yeah. Where, as they were having this conversation of like, I want to learn this and this and this. And almost makes me like teary when I think about it, because I feel like how selfless it is. But the idea that the other soul would say, well, then I'll come down, I'll help you learn that. But in order to do that, I have to then, you won't recognize me. I have to show up as a very different. So, like the alcoholic parent, or even I think like on a big picture, when we see, there's a lot of horrific stuff going on in the world. And sometimes I wonder, like, are some of these even highly evolved souls that have come down to play a contrasting role so that the populace can kind of be pushed to rise into a different way? Based
on a divine plan, maybe.
Yeah.
That's very common, what you're describing. Two things. One is, yes, because I think we're sort of talking about two scenarios. Often we reincarnate with the soul where there was karma, and we're going to have the opportunity to balance it. And, people often say to me, they ask me a lot, or fairly often, well, Linda, why don't we know about our past lives? Why don't most of us, we ought to know about our past lives rather than having to figure them out through various means. And there are different means. Regression isn't the only avenue to figure that out. But if we knew that we were an uninvolved parent to a soul, and then they came in as our mother, as our child, as our sister, we wouldn't have that blank slate to work with and just choose our behavior without any pushing from knowledge of past lives. So that happens all the time. And yes, also, there are souls that come in, for example, as a street person. And there's nothing wrong with that soul. They came in to teach us humility. They came in to teach us compassion. And they agreed to be a street person or be, because I'm trained in, abnormal psychology, or schizophrenic. And someone needs to care for that schizophrenic person in their lifetime. They agreed to carry those traits in this current life.
You also talk about past life regression and then between life soul regression. What's the difference between those?
Yeah. One is an expansion of the other. So past life regression is just what it says. I'm going to guide the client. I'm going to do an interview first. I'm going to guide the client to relax. We know through brain research that relaxation opens us up more to our intuition. Relaxation and hypnosis are directly related. And then the purpose of past life regression is usually what happens, is the discovery of one past life in great detail, scene by scene by scene. We go all the way to the death scene. Then we evaluate or analyze the life. For what reason did the client's guides choose to show the client that life? What is it explaining about current life to the client? So that's a past life regression. Between lives, what I call between lives soul regression, is what I just explained, but it's an expansion beyond past life regression. At the ending of the past life, the client again experiences how they died. Now, my client doesn't feel like they're physically dying in human life, but they know how they died in the past life. The between lives regression is at the point of the ending of the past life. We follow that automatic and natural journey of the soul when that slice of soul that caused the client to be alive in the past life, that slice of soul, I like to call it autopilot, leaves that past life body when cardiopulmonary functions are, have ceased. We follow that natural journey. And this is what happens every time we die. That piece of soul elevates, you might say, increases its frequency, and ultimately returns to the higher realm, the soul realm. And I always try to use my hands to show it, and steps back into the higher self, the totality of the energy of the higher self. And then the rest of the regression is at the higher self level, the soul level of the client. And it really becomes now time. We almost always talk to a guide. We can ask questions. The guide has benevolent information to help that person understand, how did they plan current life? What are the reasons for certain issues? Who are the souls they've known before? Are they EB? Are they IP? Are they angelic? That kind of information comes forward in the longer regression.
I find it all really fascinating. And you must have had some really profound experiences yourself, just seeing and being a part of this process. Has there been any real big aha moments for you, just in even having these conversations with people? Any insights that have popped to you that even influenced you from hearing other people?
Jason, truly, and I don't say this just lightly, I am influenced all the time. I'm learning something new. I'm learning something that relates to my own life. I'm learning something that I'll give an example. An example just pops in my mind. But the beauty for me, and I feel so blessed, honestly, is I get to travel with the client. So I get to learn about the higher realm. I get to learn about IP souls, where they come from, why they come. I don't know, an example, it's probably my guides telling me to just say this briefly. One thing I know, let me see how to say this and make it simple. One thing I know is that there are many advanced souls that continue to incarnate. There are many advanced souls that have past lives in earlier eras of time. One example, I'll just give you one example, is the soul, and I'm not speaking from religion, but this soul did exist in what are, longstanding religious teachings. The Moses soul. The Moses soul is a highly advanced earth-based soul. Yes, that soul was the soul of Moses. But what I've learned through clients who gain all kinds of information, and we can ask questions, is the Moses soul is the soul of the one we know as Gandhi. So that soul continues, not kept, continues to incarnate. And that's one example. The Moses soul incarnates today. The Moses soul, and this is what happens with highly advanced souls, the Moses soul can have more than one simultaneous earth incarnation. That soul is currently incarnating as some nameable public figures, as well as some everyday people. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how that works. I've learned that through regression. It's incredibly, I know, Jason, you keep saying fascinating. I feel the same way. It is totally fascinating. But I can tell you there are times when I come upon a client, it's not very often, that is the incarnation of one of these longstanding souls. That's, again, not common. And, I don't want to say I've regressed lots of Cleopatras and lots of Mary Magdalenes and blah, blah, blah. That's not the case. But these souls continue to work to help humanity is the bottom line.
The Inspire Health podcast will be right back.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
So interesting. I feel like our reality is just so much more vast than what we had previously conceived. And it's so amazing to be able to talk and have these conversations now and just blow our preconceived notions out of the water. Because I feel like so much of what we had previously worked with may have been relevant at the time, but we're all clearly just asking for more. Like we're ready for more. What had satiated us before is no longer, is just futile now. It just doesn't satisfy anymore. And even how you're describing souls and pieces of souls or slices of souls,
like
or it's
fractals of the soul.
It's been described as fractals of souls as well. Like that's really fascinating, and we can't totally even wrap our mind around it. And I've had to revisit it over and over and over again, and now I can digest that a little bit more because of all the ways in which we have spoken about this in different languaging, perhaps, but from different people. But it's been coming up over and over and over again. And I love it because it, it allows our reality to make more sense.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Even our challenges that we have, like some of the, and if you don't mind, I wanted to share this simple anecdotal paragraph that you had in this book, the Evolving Soul book. And here you stated, here a soul regression client explains, I am being told that my commitment to care for my 92-year-old mother and walk alongside her until she completes this lifetime is for the soul evolution of us both. In a past life, she was my 10-year-old daughter, and I abandoned because I had died of a broken heart when my husband, her father, left me. Now we are balancing the karmic remnants of the past incarnation by ending the conflict we'd had in our present life. I am voluntarily caring for her in peace while she is open to receiving my nurturance. Like, I feel like it brings so much more context and richness to our lives, this knowledge that you're sharing, and you're allowing people, you're creating a vessel and an opportunity for people to tap into, because it brings reason to the circumstances of their lives, which I think is so important, because it catapults us right away out of victimhood. It right away brings up feelings of deep compassion and forgiveness. Like, it's just a natural byproduct of the truth that we're able to tap into in a very, very real and tangible way.
And brings like meaning into the senseless or chaos, and which then, like you said, catapults you into a different field of consciousness where you can just perceive and then interact with the world differently.
I mean, I couldn't say it better myself. As I said somewhere earlier in our discussion, at the core of me, I'm a therapist. And when I discovered this kind of work, there's nothing wrong with traditional psychology, psychotherapy, and that helps a lot of people. But when I discovered this work, it expands that ability to understand ourselves and normalize ourselves in ways that, well, as I said, that I never understood until about 30 years ago. And so most of us are all too hard on ourselves. And we need to understand who we are at the core and why we have feelings, thoughts, skills, inclinations, and honor them.
Linda, are there any common questions that clients come to you with, wanting to have answered and addressed?
Well, the most common question, Taya, is when they come for the longer regression. And let me just say, when people come for the longer regression, part of the homework that I give them before we come to the day of their regression is I want them to create about 5 key questions that they hope the session will answer. And then we pose those questions verbally during the regression to the client's guide. And the answers come through the client, not through me, but through the client. The most common question is, why am I here? For what reason did I plan this current life? And then other questions are things like, what does this health problem mean? What is the purpose of this relationship? But the most overriding question is what I call life purpose. For what reason did I come into body this time? Or reasons, it's another important piece. We come into body with more than one purpose, but why? Why am I here?
As far as the health concerns that most people are dealing with, are there reoccurring messages that consistently come through with regards to that?
Or themes to them?
Yeah. Yes is the answer. 2 or 3 different thoughts about that. One is, as I said, often, but not always, but often the IP souls I work with, they're dealing with health issues. Why? Basically because those are souls, IPs and angelics, but even IPs more than angelics. IPs haven't incarnated in the human body many times. So they're not used to this container and how to operate It may seem weird to people, but they're not used to how to function within these human bodies. And then health problems, as you would imagine, sometimes come from past lives. They also sometimes we agree to be a teacher. Like, okay, I'm going to be diagnosed with X disease or X syndrome or, whatever it might be. And the people around me are going to, the people around me, I hope, have the opportunity, or they have the opportunity, and I hope they will become more nurturing, become more caring. Or I have to be more patient with myself. I expect a lot of myself, but I have to rest for 30 minutes every afternoon. I have to learn how to nurture myself because I never learned that before. So I have this health issue that requires it. There's always purpose to a health issue, and hopefully it's not a serious, but it is for some people, and there is usually meaning to that health issue.
Mm-hmm. Something that came up that I just wanted to share. My father is going through leukemia. He's in the later stages of leukemia and he's been having a rough time for probably about a year, and it's progressively getting more trying for him. And on a daily basis, I work on opening up my energy centers, my chakras, while I'm sitting in quiet at some point through the day or through the night. And I know, and I've noticed that there's almost like I've checked in with my heart, and I'm like, what is it that's so tight? What is it that kind of constricts and restricts its opening or its fullness or its vibrancy? And I've had the knowing drop in that and I share this because it might land for others who are listening in. But part of the gift of what it is that the trying times that we're in right now, with so many people becoming ill or passing on, is that it allows a tenderness to rise within those who remain. And in essence, the blasting open of the heart doors in ways that it possibly hadn't been before, because seeing a loved one, I mean, my dad and I have had a very challenging relationships, to be truthful, since I hit puberty a long time ago. And he's a very challenging man. And it's probably no accident that we've ended up at this time. We actually lived in Mexico for a while, but we both felt really compelled to come back to where our families are. And my parents live on the upper floor and we're on the lower floor. We live in the same house right now. So, if there was any doubt that we're in this time to kind of untie or work through karmic stuff, I feel like we're a fine example of that happening in the here and now. But through seeing him go from this really tough, strong, stern, they don't make him like this anymore. This level of masculine energy that he embodies. And seeing that go to who he is now, really frail, 120 pounds, probably soaking wet, has trouble walking, has trouble hammering and working with his hands, which he loves to do, is really heart tenderizing for all of us who are blessed to witness this impermanence of the physicality that we all embody. So yeah, I share that in case it's any solace to anyone who's listening in, who is taking care of a loved one, a friend or family who is going through physical and health challenges.
I'll just say briefly, I know we could, dig into a lot of these kinds of things. I'll say briefly, Taya, the story about the 92-year-old mother and the past life about abandoning the daughter is me. That is my story.
Oh,
And I share that openly now. And without giving a huge long story and a lot of detail, I became responsible for my mother's care in the final 7 years of her life. It's the same story. We had a challenging relationship, same as you described, but a challenging relationship and she didn't live in my home. She was in a senior living center near where I live. But I became the responsible child to make sure she was cared for. And as you read that piece out of my book, we gradually healed our relationship because she became open to trusting that I cared about her. And I'll just say, and I know this, you're using this, our discussion in a public way, but my mother has passed, so I think it's fine. I remember so clearly, as you just spoke, Taya, as my mother was, oh my gosh, she was maybe 9 months to a year from passing. I went to visit her one evening, and I knocked on the door of her room, and she didn't respond. And so I opened the door. And as I opened the door, she was with an aide coming toward me. And she had, it's so funny that this came to me, but it feels important to share. She was coming toward her bathroom, which was near the door. And so there she was stark naked with a, one of those the way women used to do it, those plastic shower caps, with her walker, and with the aide making sure she could, because my mother was very frail by that point. But she just saw me and said, "Hi, honey, come on in." Now, when we had a more conflictual relationship, she wouldn't have been standing there stark naked saying to me, "Hi, honey, come on in." And so that's what popped into my mind as you were sharing that. And so I guess I just want to say, may you experience the healing and the balancing with the soul that is your father as you pay attention to your own needs and your own chakras, and he's right there where you live. May you have the blessing that I came to have of healing my relationship with my mother before she passed. Now, I'm going to add one more quick thing and then stop jabbering. We can heal relationships after someone passes. And you probably know that, and you've probably had speakers and teachers with you that share that. We can talk to the soul of the loved one. So it doesn't mean we can't heal it after they pass. But there's also a beauty in healing it before they pass. So anyway, I just felt compelled to share that.
thank you.
I think that's beautiful, Linda. And so true. I think that healing can happen at any time, but there is something really beautiful about being able to do it with the person during,
and challenging.
It's also, I was just going to say, because it's also the heart of the most challenging too. So I feel like there's such an expansion that can take place when we are able to do that in the here and now.
Totally.
I know we're coming up on.
But we also signed up for the challenge. Yeah. Like, I think people need to hear that too. Like, we signed up to be embodied, and we signed up to be here and now. And we signed up to, to have these people within our lives and,
push our
boots on ground. And yes, because we have all that we need in order to be able to work through all the stuff that we initially signed up to be here for.
Completely true.
We had one conversation a while back, and was the idea of almost like a video game where you keep leveling up every time you come here. It's like the game then gets harder. So it's like you actually get different types of challenges that might push you in different ways and might even be more challenging. But at the same time, every time you're leveling up yourself, so you've got the tools within you to be able to manage it and deal with that. So I think anybody going through challenges, if you do have what's there and required all within you to be able to do what you need to do. Yeah. Linda, What I'm curious about too is, as we're finishing up here, over the past few years, have you had any specific insights that have been different from what you have experienced over the past 20 some odd years or 30 years? Just because this does seem to be a really unique time. And I know lots of guests and different people we've talked about, from indigenous elders to shamans to you name it. There's a lot of very unique stuff going on, particularly in the, not just in the planet, but I mean, in the whole cosmos in general, right at the moment. Any insights that have been different that have come up over the past few years from your work?
Yes. I'm trying to think of how to say this and how to make it simple. It is clear to me from clients as well as my own intuition that the higher realm, the higher wisdom, the source, however you want to put that, is highly concerned about various issues in humanity, whether that's the climate issues that exist on our planet, whether that's the diverse politics of people that just get stuck in their own vantage point and don't choose to comprehend, the vantage point of the other side, you might say. The sometimes lack of, again, same thing that I guess, as I just said, the lack of seeing or accepting someone else's perspective, the lack of evolution of humanity. And what I hear through a lot of regressions is that, and I sort of said this or maybe alluded to it today, the higher realm keeps working, I'll say brainstorming, if I can use that word. The higher realm keeps brainstorming ways of guiding humans in the hopes that humans make better decisions or the best decisions. And part of that is why I see more IPs and angelics in my practice, is because there are more advanced souls coming into body, or just as you guys just talked about, or being pushed to elevate because we need that elevation. So I know that some of us at the soul level are working to prepare other advanced souls to come into body, because the higher realm is concerned about how life in certain ways is lived on this planet and could be lived in a more functional, more healthy manner. So I hear about that a relative amount in regression work.
I have a question with regards to then children. As they're coming in, as these new souls are coming in from the spirit world onto the physical realm, could it be then that their role is going to be quite different and quite perhaps even more pivotal in as far as dictating our evolution on the planet? And how do we then best nurture and support them on their journey?
Well, you guys probably know, since you said you have children, and I have very adult children, but I have grandchildren. And so I see this, you probably see this in your own children, and I see it more in our grandchildren's, in that generation, the younger generation. There are more experienced souls coming into human bodies. Now, some of these experienced souls, they sort of run the gamut. Some of them are these very, very gifted. They're either academically gifted, they're musically gifted, they're, all these new, robotics and all that, they're gifted in that manner. And some of them are not just gifted, they are gifted, but they're also challenged. but they're wise. And so, yes, there are more advanced souls, even though I'll just say, and I know this from regression, experienced souls is a small portion of the human population, and experienced souls are no better than anyone else. They've just done a lot of work to get to the point of advancement. But more experienced souls are coming, because that's the way the higher realm is brainstorming how to affect change. And many of these advanced souls need help understanding themselves and accepting themselves. So yes is the answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing we've kind of found that with our kids is just from a perspective, people can sort of see if this fits for them. But
we have a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, and an 18-year-old.
And particularly over the last while, with our 5 and 7-year-old, and I would say with my 7-year-old particularly, she just knows certain things, and it's actually I'm seeing her literally remember things. Mm-hmm. Like we do a lot of, right now we're doing a lot of wild crafting. So we go out and we look for weeds that are medicine, and then we dry them, we make teas, we make tinctures, and we're doing this stuff together now with her.
So no longer weeds.
So it's not weeds anymore, it's medicines. But so a real love for the land and being able to incorporate that. And she sees stuff, and then she just knows, like she will see, it's like, oh, Daddy, this one's good for this or this. And literally the other day, Taya had a bit of a headache, and Sophie had picked this one flower, and then she kept saying, Mommy, just check this on the thing and see what it is and what it's good for. And
I said, okay, well, it's a creeping buttercup. And she said, okay, can you use the other app that Daddy got recently and check that one? And I said, honey, I have a headache right now, and to look onto these digital devices is just not comfortable for me.
But she wouldn't let it go.
She was so persistent, and I said, okay, let's try the other app. And then we take a picture of the flower using the other app. And sure enough, that also had description of what the native community, the indigenous, had typically used it for medicinally. And it was used for headaches.
They would actually grind it up and smell it. And so then she took it, she goes, I can do it, took it to the poultice and ground it up for her. And
see, she said, here, Mommy. And sure enough, it alleviated my headache.
So what it brought up for us was just this, when your kids are really like, and you have to, I think, discern the difference between sort of like more of like a neediness, sort of addiction to something that, oh, I need that, I want that, or their senses have been hijacked, or dopamine hijacking, all this kind of stuff you have to be aware of. But I feel like when your kids are really like strongly drawn to something, especially if it's tied, I think, into the natural world, listen to it, like follow it through and see where it goes, because we're so quick to sort of blanketly put like, we know more, no, that's not important, or something along those lines, and see where it goes. I know for us, it's been huge learnings in just sort of allowing it to follow through and giving the time to in the space to allow that to come up and see where it goes. Cause, it changes your perspective when we think of like, okay, well, part of what we're doing here is lighting up different memories for her, I think, in different ways that she's actually here to cultivate. So then how do we support that? The Inspire Health podcast will be right back.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. The station that makes you feel good.
Yes, and when we're parents or grandparents of these advanced souls in these young bodies, at the soul level, we've agreed to take on the responsibility to support this 5-year-old, this 7-year-old. I see this in my grandchildren or teenagers, and to support them and to let their gifts shine and do just what you said, not just say, oh, you're just 5 years old. What do you know? It's like, oh, no. That's an old soul in a 5-year-old body. Yeah. And we've agreed to be the support system to let their gifts grow and grow and grow.
Yeah.
And the last question, Linda, I wanted to ask you, just so that people have an understanding of what a session even looks like. Can you describe that briefly? And are they aware of the conversation, of what comes out of their mouth, or is it recorded and it's presented to them afterward? How does that work?
Okay. Yeah. Good question. So relaxation / hypnosis does not mean the client is going to be in a zombie state, in a unaware state. So the client is aware during the whole regression. They know what they're saying, but it is flowing through them. Yes, the sessions are all recorded. Because of COVID, I used to travel about 50 to 60% of the time, guiding some regression in my home office, but guiding, domestically and abroad. Now, virtually all the regression that I guide is on Zoom, just like we are. And so anyone can have a regression. They are awake. They are aware. The whole session is recorded. The client may not remember small little details and nuances, but then we have conversation on email back and forth. They can process it further with me if they choose. But yes, they are conscious. They know what's happening, and they have the recording to go back to.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Linda, where can people learn more about the work that you're doing? I know you've got a bunch of different courses that are offered, your books. Where can people learn more about you guys?
Best way is our website. So the website, this is all run together, is Raven, like the bird, Raven Heart, like the heart on your chest, ravenheartcenter.com. And what I'm doing, where I'm going, what's happening is all on the website.
And are there group sessions as well at your center, or are they mostly individual based?
Well, it's interesting that you're asking that, Taya. I recently, because sometimes my regression schedule is complicated and sometimes people have to wait a bit of time to have a regression. I've recently started a small group, what I might call a spiritual mentoring community that's going to meet periodically, open to anyone, where we can have discussions and ask questions and that sort of thing, and come together in a small group setting. And that option is on my website.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. We'll share all that information below the video and on our website as well.
Perfect.
That was wonderful, Linda. What a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today and being a part of this really important series.
Totally my pleasure. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to inform and educate. And I love what you guys are doing. So it's just been my great pleasure.
Thank you, Linda.